Hi, this is Matt from Useful Charts. Earlier, as you probably know, on the Useful Charts channel, I did a video which you can find by going all the way down here to the bottom to the behind the scenes playlist. And a while back, it's almost 2 years ago now, or over 2 years ago, I think. I made a video about how I make my family tree charts using LibreOffice Draw, and I walked through the process. And I know that a lot of you have watched this and have used LibreOffice to make lots of great charts, and I've really been appreciating looking at all of those. However, these days I actually use Adobe Illustrator. I had to make that switch when I started working with other creators and other publishers. It just makes it easier to have that format because it's the kind of standard format within the industry for graphics design. So you can probably tell here from my desktop that nowadays I also use a Mac rather than Linux. I still use Linux from time to time, and I still use LibreOffice from time to time, but I've switched to a Mac and to the Adobe suite for most of my work just because then I have a format that I can share with others. Anyway, I'm going to make a special video walking through how I make my charts on Adobe Illustrator. Okay, so yeah, this is going to be similar to the other video I made. I'm just going to ramble a little bit, so it's going to be a little bit slower, not as polished as my other videos. So I'm going to start by opening up Adobe Illustrator. This is software that you do have to pay for, but it is available for Windows or the Mac. I'm going to go ahead here and do Create New. And then the default here is a nice 920 by 1080 size, which is the kind of dimensions, or at least the aspect ratio of a typical screen these days. So that's what I'm going to start with. Now, the first thing I always do is go up here to View and do Show Grid, just because I always like to have a grid to work with for aligning things up and just planning out my chart. Now on Mac in Adobe, you hold down the Option button, and I use the mouse roller to zoom in and out. I do a lot of zooming in and out, so that's maybe one of the first things you're going to want to know. I think on Windows, it might be slightly different. Now, I'd also like to point out that you can customize Adobe Illustrator, like where you want all your tools and windows and what you want to see, and even the colors and whatnot. So your screen might look a little bit different, but all the tools you should be able to find somehow. Either you can always find everything either through the menu system or through various icons. Okay, so another thing you should know, I'm going to point out kind of differences between LibreOffice and Adobe Illustrator. In LibreOffice, you can set a background color for the whole document, but in Adobe Illustrator, it's best to do it another way. So what you do is you actually just create an object which you can put on the bottom to be your background. So here is the rectangle tool, and I'm just going to draw a big rectangle. Now another thing I forgot to do, which we should do right away, is go to the View menu and also do Snap to Grid. So therefore, I'm going to switch back to the selection tool. In Adobe Illustrator, you often always have to keep kind of switching back to the selection tool because then you can move things around. But notice that now that I have that as snap to grid, it's always going to kind of snap easily to the grid. So I'm going to snap that up here to the corner, and then I'm going to drag that and snap it down there. So basically I just created a rectangle that is the same size as my artboard. That's what Adobe Illustrator calls the background. Now in the top left on Illustrator, you're always going to have these two drop downs here. The first one is your foreground color. So you can see here it is white. I'm going to drop it down, and you could change that to whatever you want. Now I want to customize it. So actually I'm going to do something slightly different. I'm going to come over here to the color tool, And when you click on that, you can choose your color in all kind of different ways using RGB or a hex code. Just pay attention here. You also have these two squares, the same as these two squares over here. This one is your fill. I use the word foreground. I guess I should say fill. It's kind of like the inside of the square. Whereas if you click on this one, that's your border. So that's the same as this one up here. So I want to be changing the fill. So here I can just put in a hex code that I want. These days for my background, I use EDE 8D8. And that gives me a nice beige color for the background. Now I don't actually need a border on that, so I'm going to click again here, click here, and this first option here with the red line is none, so that takes away the border. You can still see the black line, but that's just the edge of the artboard. Okay, so there I have a background. Now, one thing you should be familiar with if you're doing any kind of graphic design is layers. LibreOffice uses layers as well, so you can do something similar there. But in Adobe Illustrator, we could click on Layer. It defaults to just the one layer, and so the first object that I created automatically goes in that layer 1. What I'm going to do is go down here. I'm going to create a new layer. Okay, it automatically called it layer 2, and it's putting it above layer 1. Now this is useful because what I can do is if you click this second square here, you can lock this layer, which means now if I click and try to move that background, I can't move it. If I unlock it, see, I can move it around. Okay, let's put it back where it's supposed to go and lock it. This way, I can now draw things on top, and I don't have to worry about that background slipping. Okay, so here, just as an example, here I created a new square. I can move that around without the background moving. All right, I'll delete that. Another useful thing you can do here, this first square, you can toggle visibility. So I can just turn that layer off. That way I can still see the grid, I can work on my chart, and then when I'm done, turn the background on, it'll be in the back, and it'll look nice. So for now, I am going to indeed turn that off so it's not visible. I'm just going to stick within layer 2. So my entire chart is going to be in layer 2. Okay, what I'm going to do as an example, coming up on the channel early in 2022, I'm going to do a video about the Rockefeller family, one of the wealthiest families, if not the wealthiest family, in all of U.S. history. So we're going to be looking at their chart. This is an old chart I made many years ago using LibreOffice. So I'm going to recreate it in Adobe Illustrator as an example to show you how I do it. So I'm just gonna, I actually have two screens, so I'm gonna go put that on my other screen, and then I'm just gonna look at it from time to time as a guide. All right, so let's start the chart. Let's start with the rectangle tool. If you hold any of these tools down, you kind of get some additional tools that you can go back and forth from rectangle to a circle and so forth, or line. That's going to be an important one. But for now, I'm going to start with the rectangle. I'm going to zoom in, click and drag, and there, I've got my first rectangle. Now, the big difference between Adobe Illustrator and LibreOffice is that in Adobe Illustrator, you cannot put text inside a rectangle. In LibreOffice, you can create one object, which is, you know, a rectangle, let's say, and you can kind of put text right inside that box and then move it around, and it's just one object. Okay, and that's very useful for creating family tree charts because it keeps all the text and the shapes aligned and together, and you don't have to worry about anything messing up. So that's quite handy. It's one of the reasons why I like LibreOffice. However, Adobe Illustrator doesn't let you do that. So if I have my box here and I just double click on it, which is what you do in LibreOffice, you see nothing happens. I don't get a cursor. I can't add text to that. What I have to do is create text as a totally different layer. So over here, this is the text tool. You can see there's some options here, but I'm just going to go with the type tool. And then I have to create text basically on top. So if I click, it gives me a default text here, but I'm going to replace it. So I'm going to type in John D. Rockefeller Sr. Okay. And then I just hit escape, and then that deselects, and then I can move that text around. So you can see these are totally two different objects. So for sake of ease, the first thing I'm going to do is combine the two. But first I'm going to do some formatting changes. So depending on what object you have selected, the tools at the top are going to change, giving you kind of what you're going to need. So if I have text selected, it's going to give me some options for text. So first thing I'm going to do is change the alignment, so that's center aligned. And then I can go to character, which gives me all the font options. The default font that I use is this one here. No idea how to pronounce that, but that's the font I use. And let's go ahead and make that bigger. And you know what? Let's make it bold as well. All right, so that's some of my text. And you know what? Let's put some dates in as well. So I'm going to put in just his birth to death, which is 1839 to 1937. And in Adobe Illustrator, I can actually select different parts of the text here. If I want to select just the dates, I can make that a little bit smaller maybe and take off the bold so it is distinguished a little bit from the upper text there. Okay, so let's see here. Let's maybe make my box a little smaller as well. Something like that. All right, now, just like in Adobe Illustrator, I don't know why that showed up. Oh, I don't know what that was. Anyway, it's gone now. Alignment is something you want to familiarize yourself with. So because I'm using a grid, you know, I can kind of just eyeball it, but you know, you never really want to rely on that, especially as the chart gets bigger. So what I can do instead, if I select both of these objects, the text and the square, you can either do that by clicking somewhere over here, dragging so that you get both of them selected, or you can hold down the shift, select the text, select the box. And you'll notice here at the top, it automatically, because I have two things selected, it's like, you probably want to align. So it gave me some align options here. So I can go here to make sure they're center aligned, and then I can go here to make sure they're vertical aligned. Okay, so that line things up for me. Let's snap it to the grid somewhere. You know, that doesn't actually look aligned to me, but maybe that's because of this period here. I'm going to go ahead and change the color of the box right now too. You might have noticed that on my older charts, I always used white text and kind of a dark square in the background, whereas these days I tend to use a light color for the square and black text. So let's change that background. So I can do it a couple ways. I can do it here, gives me some default options. I can do it here. I can also do it here. Now my default colors that I use aren't already here, so I'm going to go ahead and get them. What you can do is if you have another file where you custom created a bunch of colors, like a palette that you were using, you can import that palette into a new document. So that's what I'm going to do. You click here. Oops. You go down to Open Swatch Library, Other Library, and then I have to find it. So I'm going to go to Documents. I'm going to go to my posters. Here's where I keep some of my posters. And And I'm going to go with the matrilineal chart because I know that I used that palette on the matrilineal chart. So this gives me some of these custom colors that I added here at the end. And I can just click on this actually and drag it into the side here. And then if I want to use it, I just click on it. So I got the background selected. I'm going to go over here and choose this purple color. There we go. My background's purple. All right. Next thing you do, let's get a photo of John D. Rockefeller. I usually go to Wikipedia for photos because then they tend to be either public domain or Creative Commons. So I'm going to save this to my desktop. If you hold down Shift and click and drag, it will default to a square. And then if I release it, it has this selection tool. Then I just hold down Command and do C. On Windows, I think it would be Control C, which basically copies that. Then I go back to Adobe Illustrator, Command V, which is paste, or on Windows, Control V, paste. And boom, I've got my image. Really easy. Now, a very important thing you need to keep in mind when using Adobe Illustrator is there's two ways to store an image in your file. One is, let me just show you how to do it. So I'm going to create this another way here. I'm going to open this back up. Instead of using that selection tool that I used, another thing you can do on a Mac is hold down Shift, Command, and the number 4. And that's basically a screen capture function. But on the Mac, if you do Shift, Command, 4, you can just select which part of the screen you want to capture. So instead of capturing your whole screen, you can select. So here, it doesn't do a square automatically for you. You have to pay attention to those numbers. So here, I'm going to set it to 306, 306. Okay, and when I release, it's going to take a photo of that, basically a screen capture, and it's going to save that square as an image, as a new file on the desktop. So this is just, I'm showing you a second way to do this. So I mean, you could have created that crop some other way using Photoshop or some other software program. But if you have that image as a file, one thing you can do in Illustrator is just drag the file from the desktop right into your file. So you just release it, boom, and it's right there in your file ready to use. However, and this is why I'm bringing this up, if you click and drag something into an Adobe Illustrator file, what it does is it just creates a link between this file and the file that we're working on, which means if you delete this file off the desktop, this image is going to disappear. Okay, so that's not that great, but why it is useful is, let's say you're creating an Adobe Illustrator file and you want to make a change to this image. You can actually bring this, say, into Photoshop and, do whatever Photoshop changes you want to make to this image file. And then once you save it, it will automatically change this image as well, right in the Illustrator file, which is quite a handy thing. However, I'm not doing that. I'm just, let's say I just brought this photo in and I want to use it, but maybe I'm going to delete that off the desktop later and I don't want this guy to disappear. What I have to do is I have to embed that into the file. And so all I have to do is go here to the links section and it'll show all my various things that I've linked. Right now I have only one, that image. I click on it and then I click this menu. I do Embed Image. And basically that embeds it into the file. So now if I delete this, let's send it to my trash, that's fine. This picture is not going to disappear. It's now a part of my Adobe Illustrator file. If I use the other method, which was just, taking it from the preview and cutting and pasting it in, because a second file isn't created for this, it's automatically embedded. So you don't have to worry about embedding it. See if we go here, see that second one already embedded. This symbol here means embedded. Okay, so those are just two ways to add images. All right, let's add a line. So the line doesn't get its own button here. You have to click on the rectangle tool, hold it down, and then you get some other options here. We're going to switch down to the line. So now we're working with the line tool. And we'll just click somewhere and drag, and if we hold down the shift button, just like in LibreOffice, then we can make sure we get a nice straight line. So I'm just going to create a nice vertical line here. Now, since we're talking about a line and not a shape, the color square that we're more concerned with here is this one here, which is going to give us the color for the line. Or in the case of a shape like a rectangle, it's going to color the border. So here there's no color at all. That's why it's not really showing up as anything. So let's go ahead and make that purple. And let's change the thickness. Just kind of eyeballing it here for now. 5. And go back to the selection tool. I always have to return to the selection tool in Adobe Illustrator. It doesn't always default back, but you get used to that quickly. There's a shortcut key. You just hit V or you just click there. Okay, and then I can click and drag that onto there. Now, the reason why I clicked on there is to see this shows me where the center is, so I know that I need to move that over 1. The other way to do it, of course, would be to click and drag all of those and then do a line. But then you can see it misaligned it here, but since it's all selected, then I could just hold, drag, put it where I want it. Okay, oh, actually one thing I forgot to show you earlier. So as I mentioned, this text box and the rectangle are two separate objects. If I want to combine them, click, drag, select, you can group them. You can group things in LibreOffice too, but in Adobe Illustrator, it's almost more important so that you can keep your text and your squares together. So one way to do it is just to right click. There's your group button, group it. So now it's grouped. So whenever I click on that, I don't have to worry about two separate things anymore. It's grouped. Okay. Let's shorten this up. Now, one thing I taught in LibreOffice that you can do here as well is round out the corners of that line, which is what I often do. So let's just make another line. I'm going to cut and paste. I do a lot of cut and pasting. So on a Mac, of course, it's Control C, Control V. Here it's Command C, Control V, or Command V, cut and paste. I've got another line. Now for rotating in Adobe Illustrator, so if you're using your selection tool, you select it. If you hover near the edge, notice that your cursor changes. As long as it's on this rotate icon, you can then click and you can rotate it. And then if you hold shift, it's going to lock it into 90-degree positions and so forth. So I'm going to go like that, make it vertical, release. Now I'm going to move it so that it joins in with this one. But you see the problem here. Okay, you get two straight edges, and so it doesn't look that great. So what I can do is select both of these, go to stroke, and this is where you're going to get all the options for your line. You can see cap is here. If I switch it to a round cap, problem now solved. Okay, so both of those are now nice and round. When I put them together, it looks nice. So this is the function that you also use, the stroke function here, to create dotted lines. So let's create another line. And let's say we want a dotted line for this one. If we go under stroke, we just select here dashed line. And then you can actually choose whatever options you want. So you could put in your dash, you want it to be 3 points, and then you want your gap to be 3 points. Now you'll notice here it's still rounded, so it looks a bit funny. So I'm going to turn it back to square. And there you go. It's 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. So it creates a dotted line. But if you want to change that, you could say make it 6, 6. You can make it whatever you want. Okay, so if you're familiar with my charts, you know that I use the dotted lines for females. Okay, I'm just thinking of, I'm not going to make the whole chart. I'm just kind of focusing on some of the main tasks that are needed to make a chart that looks like useful chart style. One of the questions I got a lot is, how do I do curved lines? I'm not sure. Well, you can make curved lines in LibreOffice, but it's really difficult. One of the good things about Illustrator is it's easy. So I started putting curved lines into my charts when I started using Illustrator. Now in Illustrator, there's several different ways to do it. I'm going to just show you the easiest one. Let's say I want to create a curve line. Go to the line tool. Actually, let's start by making a circle. Okay, so I'll start with a circle. So hold down Shift. And I can make a circle as big as I want. Let's just make it a random size. Okay, now I have a circle. I can move that around. Adobe Illustrator has a really useful tool here called the scissors tool. Normally, this defaults to the eraser, but if you hold on the eraser, you can switch to the scissors tool. And I can come down here with the scissors tool. And if I click here, and then I click here, okay, go back to the selection. Basically, you can't see what I've done, but I scissored here and I scissored here. And now if I click on this portion, move it away, it's cut. I basically just cut out that part of the circle, which gives me the nice curve. So I don't need this, so I'll just select it, delete it. But now I've got this nice curve. I can just come put it in over here. Let's say I want to continue it here, so I'm going to cut and paste another line. And, oh, see, there's a bit of a problem there. No problem, though. I'll click on this, make it a bit bigger. All right, there you go, curved line. Let's say we want to make it dotted. Let's delete that. Let's select 1, 2, 3 parts of that line. Go up to stroke, dash line, make it a rectangle. There you go. You've got a nice curved line there. Okay. I think that's probably the main things that I wanted to show you. Maybe just make one more box here, just because that might bring up some additional things that would be useful. As you know, I usually put house names on top. So let's create a little line here that says House of Rockefeller or something like that. So we want to start off by making a new rectangle. Notice that in Illustrator, it defaults to the last thing that I use. So the last thing I was using was just a purple line with no fill. So it automatically gave me a square with a purple line with no fill, which is actually useful because that's what I want. Actually, no, I want a white fill in here. So it's already got the purple line, but let's put white fill. Now to make the rounded corners, in Illustrator, you notice that there's always these little dots here. These you get markers for the square all around the corner, and then corners, and then in the 4 corners you have these little circle icons. If you click on any of those and then just drag that, look at that. You can make your square have nice rounded corners. So there we go. And then I'm just gonna, oh no, I'm not. I'll create a new text. Create some text here. Let's put Rockefeller family. Yeah, it defaulted to my font. Let's make it bold and put it in there. Notice it's not aligning because it's sticking to the grid. So I'll select both. This time I'll just click and drag, select both items, and use one of these alignment tools here to make sure it's all lined up. And in fact, I'm going to group that so that even if I click off it, it always stays together. All right, so I mean, those are the main functions that I would use, and then I just keep building the chart. And then when I'm done, I would go over here to layers, make that bottom layer visible so that it puts the background on it, and there I would have my chart. Oh, I know one more thing I should probably show you. As I mentioned in the LibreOffice tutorial, there's two main things that every graphic designer uses a lot, and that is align and arrange. So I've already shown you aligning. What about arranging? Arranging means like what thing goes on top of what. So let's say we create a new object. For some reason it defaulted to a black square for me. Let's just make that blue or something like that. So because this is the most recent object I created, it's putting it on top. But let's say I wanted to put it on the bottom. Let's say I wanted to create like some sort of square underneath him. There's a couple ways you can do it. If you right click and you can go down here. First of all, I'll show you transform. You can do rotate, you can do reflect, and so forth. But it gives me arrange, which means you can bring to front, send to back, just like you could in LibreOffice. So right now I'm going to send it to back. And you can see there it just tucked it in behind everything else. Let's say I want to make that gold or something like that because I want it to like really highlight him. So there you go. That's an easy way to arrange your objects. You can also do it simply by going into the layers box. Notice when I send it to back, it doesn't send it to the back of the entire document. It just sent that object to the back of layer 2. So my background is actually still going to be at the very bottom. So you can see here, if you use this layers window and you click on any of these layers, it's going to show you every object in that layer and the order in which they appear. So if you want to move that, up or down, so here now it's on top of the purple box, but not on top of the image. It's on top of both, or it's at the very bottom. So this is useful. You can move all kinds of things around really easily that way. Okay, so that was a little tutorial on how I make my charts in Adobe Illustrator. I hope you found that useful. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I'll do my best to give you answers for them. I'm not necessarily an Adobe Illustrator expert, but like I said, I'll do my best. So thanks for watching.